Hi, Yvonne. You got me just dancing away.
That's why we put that bit of music at the beginning, so we had the opportunity to sway in our seats. Right? Excellent. Hi, Ellie. Good to be with you again. I cannot believe another week has gone. I mean, this is the freaky bit, right? It's like,
yep,
wow.
Absolutely.
Here we are again. Myth-busting on behalf of Permission to Thrive. And looking forward to the two phrases that we're going to be looking at today. And I'm going to hand over to you to let you introduce the first one, Evie.
It is like one I think a lot of people will resonate with. It's like, I'm not enough. And I think it's so like famous as a belief, as a limiting belief that has created like a whole sort of like system behind it, like the imposter syndrome is based on that limiting belief. Of course, like as we see things happening in the media and like around us, and when like especially when we compare ourselves to others, is where we really think I'm not enough. I have so many other things to do. Look what other people are doing. Why can't I not do it as well? That sounds so great. Why I don't sound like this, and so on and so forth. Let's unpack that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one, and I guess from a saboteur's perspective, the judge, because our judge is always judging, and our judge will judge us as hard, if not harder, than it does others and circumstances. And so we've always got that little nudge of, well, look what that person's doing. You're not even doing that yet. So that of course just brings up all of those feelings and sensations of not being enough, and it's really painful and tangible. And I know from my own experience of that sensation of I'm not enough, and I'm not sure whether that's been my judge and my hyperachiever, or both of them having like a full-on party potentially. But when it's come up for me, it's a feeling that really comes in I can really feel it in my body. There's a sensation that goes with it. Mm-hmm. And it's that constant internal critic that gets to really measure who we are by what we've done or what we haven't done. So very achievement based, very, well, nobody else is telling you that you're good at this thing, so what makes you think you're good at that thing? All of those types of messages that feed into it.
It is that external validation that we are so used to like seeking in order to ensure that we are enough. But I think it also stems from our young age. Yes, being a hyperachiever myself, I can see it like cropping in, like, or used to quite a lot. And it also is like I always, when I hear Shazad, when he says, how he speaks with his kids, and like when he says, well, why do I love you? And then he starts asking questions, because you're doing this, because you're doing that, because you're doing that. And then at the end he says, no, none of that. I love you because you are you. That's it.
Yeah.
If that is what you have in your mind from a very young age, then it's not going to be likely that you're going to fall in the trap of I'm not enough. because you will always feel that, okay, I haven't done this and that and the other, but I mean, that doesn't really matter. It is
Indeed.
important that I am me and
Yes.
I am enough. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is what always, like, makes me feel so. You really need to tell people more like
Yeah,
this.
yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. When we go back to childhood, and even if even if our parents, I mean, my parents, beautiful, kind, warm, loving, but there's always a comparison. One of four siblings, but your sister's done that, and once that starts to play into your system of, I can do this, but this person does it better, then there's all that. It's just so easy to then have that sense of not being enough, not being quite enough. And that, in school, I'm sure if you went into a classroom and asked the class, how many of them have had moments of not feeling enough? I never get an A+, and therefore I'm not enough. And actually, it's not that you're not enough. That's a score on a paper. That's something about, the education you are or are not receiving. That's about, your own sense of being able to apply your knowledge. That's got nothing to do with who you are at your core. At your core, you are valued and valuable, and that you will always remain. So you will always be enough. But I wonder how many children get to hear that message.
Well, I don't think many, and you're right, because of the way the society is set up, we always strive for something, right? We always are measured against something, and that is why we are seeking external validation all the time. But also, I think, as you said, parents don't have to be like bad parents. They just, don't understand that language is important,
Yeah,
and that it shapes our lives in many ways. So yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. But I like also when you were talking there, and I think I have mentioned that before in one of our chats, but like it always comes to me whenever I hear this. Like I remember this discussion we had with a schoolmate of mine, and we went outside our school, and I was like, oh, how, our little school and stuff when we were kids, and it's like, don't remind me of this school. And I'm like, why? Like we she was the best student. She was the most good looking girl in the place. You would expect, my God, she will have the most fantastic memories of this. And yet there was so much pressure from her family. And she also thought from the teachers, which we had the same teachers. I never thought that, but she had that pressure to do as well as she did. And she never really enjoyed that.
yeah,
So the memory is like of something that brings a lot of pressure rather than, you know, something nice that happened in the past, and
yeah,
that you can carry with you. So, and I think that stems from that I'm not enough kind of
yeah.
scenario.
Yeah, definitely. And I hear in that, as you're saying, how easily you then become the hyperachiever. Because if there's that sort of pressure to perform, to reach a certain standard, and it's just like in you from a young age, and even if it comes to you at a later age, but it's in you that you must perform, and only through the performance will you be enough. That in and of itself just dictates how you're likely to approach life, right? And how everything is about, have I got the best mark? Did I have I finished that ABC? Always the next thing, and what else do I need to do to kind of show that I am enough, that I am doing enough. And actually the doing and the being are not one and the same.
Mm-mm.
Being here, you are enough. All the things that you achieve and you do, beautiful, wonderful, to be celebrated, to be seen. But that's not. about who you are at your core. You were born enough. And I think that for me is such an important message behind most of these patterns and these narratives that drive us,
Yeah, because
or
if
actually
you think,
hold us prisoner.
sorry, I just jumped in there. But if you think like the hyperachiever, what do we do with the hyperachiever? It becomes like a vicious cycle because you like want to do things, but because you're feeling you're not enough, you are now procrastinating and you're leaving things undone. And what does that tell you? That you're not enough. That's why you're not doing it. It's like it becomes like the egg and the chicken scenario.
Yes.
So of course.
Yeah.
By itself, just that should trigger or should tell you that this is a limiting belief that will not let you move forward.
Absolutely. And I think, as we look at that, if this comes up for you, so if anyone's listening or, whether live or on replay, just to remember that if this is something that comes up for you, that I'm not enough feeling or thought, to remember that you're already enough exactly as you are. You were already enough before you won your first medal, got your first certificate, did your first anything. You were already enough. And, when I talk a lot about coming back to self, this is the kind of stuff that I mean, is really coming back to the truth of who you are and why you're here. And it's not this stuff that we have had kind of embedded and trained into us that really, don't get me wrong, people can still excel with these voices, but they're usually then driven by fear, not
Absolutely.
by love, not by joy. So, there are lots of people who do achieve, but if that driving force is fear, then there's an awful lot of internal, and I would call it damage, being done because your cortisol levels, your stress levels are probably like on fire, like constantly pushing you to do that next thing, and within that is a lot of discomfort.
For sure. And the thing is also to consider, because I work with women that they are either like moving into like new work or like leaving work altogether, that change of like getting into retirement and stuff. So if you feel that you need the external validation to be something, to be enough, then what do you do in these scenarios? And where the purpose is sort of taken away from you,
Yeah.
or is it really taken away from you?
Yeah.
So you need to recalibrate and say, okay, I really don't need all these things to make me be who I am.
Yeah.
I am, and that's that. And I can start from here to do whatever I want all the
Yeah.
time, always. So
Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of and there's a big difference between doing what you want, what you truly want, and doing stuff because you think you have to or feel you have to, because actually that's the only way people are going to think that you are enough. And again, seeking that external validation. And I love this kind of potential action step that you can take, and that's like about writing a letter to yourself from the perspective of someone who loves you unconditionally. Because we are so conditioned, so much of what we do is from a conditioned perspective, right? But what would a letter from somebody who loves you unconditionally look like? What would it tell you? How would it uplift you? How much more connected would you feel to yourself and begin to realize that you are enough just as you are?
absolutely. And I would like to take that a notch further, with tying it in with positive intelligence, because if you don't feel that you love yourself unconditionally, start like connecting with your elder self to with your wise self, with your sage self, because they will be able to give you that strength to understand and um, love yourself unconditionally. Well, if nobody else does it, we can do it for ourselves. So,
And it starts with ourselves.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
absolutely starts with ourselves. And this is one of the things that I know we're both really passionate about. And again, it's an important part of Permission to Thrive. Why do we want to bring women back to themselves? Why do we want them to unpack all these narratives? Because underneath all of those narratives is the true self, is the brilliant, brilliant self that has something to do here. And if we don't unpack and if we don't release, we don't get to do the shining that we're truly here to do. That is innate, that is within us. And again, when you talk about that older, wiser self, our navigator, as we call it in PQ, is finding out, well, what does that even mean to have a navigator? What is it that the navigator does for me? What is the power behind it? That's a lot of the work that we do in Permission to Thrive. And knowing that you have this inside you. This is not something you have to go off and learn. It is innate.
Yep.
Knowing how to access it is the part that we help you to come to. And once you do, don't get me wrong, all of the narratives don't suddenly fall away, but they become less powerful. And the less power they have over you, the more you get to tap into what is truly inside of you. And that innate wisdom is, it's incredible. Some of the exercises that we do around that beautiful visualization that Shazad did around, I loved that so much and got so much from it. So yeah, we want to just get rid of these layers of untruths.
And you don't need permission to do it, because it's up to you, right?
Yeah, we say permission to thrive because it's you giving yourself
You
permission.
give
Nobody is going
exactly.
to give you the permission. It's just for you to decide, I'm giving myself permission to expand and to explore, because these are really important parts of getting to our true self. And so let's have a look at the other phrase that we were going to tap into this week, because this one is, I have to prove myself. And there's some correlation between these two. I'm not enough. I have to prove myself to be enough, right? So these are two phrases. Again, hyperachiever is likely to use this phrase, and also the restless, which I can completely relate to. Gosh, so many. Oh my gosh, so many layers of to be that are released and being released. So I want to say I've been working on this like for a year, and so many shifts have come, and it's been brilliant. And yet there's still work to do, and that's great. That's why I love it. This is lifelong for me. But I have to prove myself is, again, striving for validation to feel worthy, rather than owning that innate value that is given to us. We were born and designed with it, right? I don't know, how does it resonate with you? Is this a phrase that has come up for you?
Not so much. I think that the I'm not enough bit was much more prominent for me. That I have to prove myself. I don't know. I never really, like, even as a kid, I was never really like very interested in like what others thought. So that's the reason why that was not really resonant. Of course, there have been moments that they sort of like played in there somehow, but I can see like the validation potentially. To me, it was more like a showing off as procrastination, rather, because I'm very, yes, I have always said I'm like a big procrastinator, or I used to be.
Indeed.
This is one of the things I'm working on, like, all the time. But I think that's how it shows up for me more. It's not, maybe I have dismissed the idea that I have to prove myself, because that is by itself looking for that external validation, or being interested on what others are thinking. So I just translate it into something else. And that is also one of the things that we do. And that's another myth, in a way, that, it's sort of another layer over the
Yes.
things that we are battling with throughout our lives. And I love what you said about, an ongoing learning process, and that it is. It's like for all of us, we don't have all the answers, and we don't really want to have all the answers, because then, what are we going to learn? And I think, like, every single day, every single discussion is an opportunity for learning and
Yes.
for becoming better, and better, not just for ourselves, but like around, for
Yes.
everyone around us. But yeah, the thing I want to just mention here is that there are phrases that maybe they seem not to resonate, but they are sort of hiding behind something else. So it is also part of the work, to uncover these things and be a little bit more open to, what exactly it is that is limiting us. So
Absolutely. And we have to remember, like, the saboteurs are sneaky, right? They're not always blatantly obvious in how they show up. So the language may be different. So I myself is language that I can say, yes, I'm familiar with that. Somebody else may say, as Evie has, not so familiar, but I kind of also hear some of that backstory. I understand some of that validation part, but it interprets differently for me. And understanding that we are individuals, so the interpretation of it may be very different for us. However, the line, the story underneath is likely to be relatively the same, but the saboteurs will come at it from very different angles. So actually, more than anything, it's our awareness of these saboteurs. What are some of the key things that are likely to be familiar? Somebody else has got a restless saboteur. We may say, oh yeah, how that shows up for me is X, Y, and Z. And then there may be things that show up for us that are completely different.
absolutely.
Because we also have to remember that we have different life experiences. We've grown up in different homes and all that sort of thing. And all of that is an influence. So understanding that there's always this little, I see the phrase, it's coming up a bit differently for me. And that's okay. But being aware of it is the bit that we work on. That for me is the bit of being able to identify. And we don't identify so that we can now start judging ourselves for it. So,
No, absolutely not.
That can happen. It's almost like, oh my gosh, I'm this, I'm that. Why, how did I not know this? It's not about that. It's about revealing so that you can then give yourself permission to do something about it. Because if that script, if that narrative, if that phrase is stopping you from being all that you can be and all that you're put here to be, I would say that the vast majority, if not everyone, would want to do something about it. Like, if I can do something about it, why would I not?
100%. And I think that's what I would like to invite people to consider, is that being aware is a very big step, because you realize that you can do something about it. And even for things that you're not 100% sure, once you start getting the curiosity of the sage, then things will show, will reveal themselves to you in different lights, and you will see, and even surprise yourself sometimes, like, this is why I act like this, or this is why something triggers me, or this is why I'm just sitting here and doing nothing, playing on my phone for 5 hours when I could have done something else.
Yes.
So once you realize that, then you really cannot go back and unsee it. And that's when action takes place. That's when activate happens. And I think it's brilliant. to know that without judgment.
Absolutely.
Remind me, what is the word that we said? Discernment, right? Not judgment. Discernment.
Yes,
yeah.
Discernment. Definitely. And just coming back to that, I have to prove myself phrase from, again, personal experience is just always the easiest place to share from. It's, because it's an experience, and therefore I can just say how that has shown up for me as a restless, doing, and, like there's just not enough doing to be done, just constantly. And apart from the fact that it's completely exhausting, it doesn't get you anywhere, the constant doing, because you may be constantly doing, but you may not constantly be finishing. So understand that they are two very different things. It's draining, and actually you just get to a point where you think, how much more do I have to do to prove that I'm enough? Even linking those two together, right? How much more do I have to do? And underneath all of that doing is coming back to understanding that the value is, I bring value just simply by being. I don't have to do anything to prove my worth. I don't. I literally don't, which I love, like that. For me, taking that on board was just like, so when I am kicking back and doing nothing, I'm good with it. There's no guilt.
Absolutely.
I don't think like, oh my gosh, I should be at my laptop doing the next thing and then the next thing. I don't do that anymore. I did before, and I don't do that anymore. I'm just like, I'm really, really happy and joyful in my moments of doing nothing. I love it.
For sure. And, because also if you think how our lives are generally and what is expected like a non-stop battle in a way. And you always have to be doing something to show that, I don't know, that you're productive, I suppose. But when we say it's you are enough as you are, you don't have to do anything about it, doesn't mean that you need to be lazy. Also, it's a very different thing. And I want to discuss this here, because some of this can sort of like the saboteurs will come and tell you that this is what we're talking about, and that's not it at all. It's just that you are okay when you give yourself the space, and you need to, because Yvonne will tell you definitely you need to, in order to be able to be 100%, or like whatever percent you want, in order to achieve what you want to achieve. So
yes, definitely. And then that's something that I've seen in a lot of the women that I have worked with is, especially if they've got hyperachiever and they've got something like restless or what have you going on, it's a lot, because there is this persistent voice that is, no, don't you dare put that pen down, you need to do the next thing, and then you need to do the next thing, and then you need to do the next thing. And then we call it being driven, right?
Yep.
So we then have another language that we use around that, like, oh, she's just so driven, she's just so on it. Oh my gosh, stop. How do we think we end up with burnout and high stress levels, fatigue? Because these narratives are running out, and they're making you believe that it's the right thing to do in order to prove yourself, to be enough, to do all this stuff. Absolutely not. If you want to do great things, one of the first things you have to learn to do is self-care, is actually do you.
Mhm.
And when you learn to be in that space and you learn to nourish yourself and replenish yourself, what is possible for you to achieve then is like next level. And this is something that I've learned and that I am learning. I am still in the midst of it, and absolutely appreciating the value now of the resting, of my meditation, of my walks, all the things that I do that just make me feel great and reconnect me to my body and my being. Wow. They're the things that enable me to do the good work when I do put pen to paper or come to my laptop, not those voices inside that are telling me I must, and if I don't, somebody else will, etc., etc.
They can be brutal, can't they? The voices.
Tiring, right? Tiring, and coming at you from different angles about different things. It's just it, and when you're not aware of it, you just don't know any different. So you just keep on doing it. And this is again the work that we are doing in Permission to Thrive is we need to break this. We need to stop this, and we need to start coming to that place of self-appreciation for who we are, as we are, being who we are, and knowing that actually when we come back to self and we start operating with discernment, with love as the driver, not fear, what is possible for us is probably way bigger than we can even perceive in this moment in time.
And of course, like in community, it's like easier to deal with these things because like a lot of us have different limitations, and we can all work together and help each other, which makes big difference when it comes to this type of limitations, this type of, because like as Yvonne said in the beginning, you feel it in your body. It's an actual sensation. When you have a limiting belief, it's a very strong thing. It's a very real thing. So some of us think that's the absolute truth, and that's when you have to ask yourself, is it really? And go through these discussions so you can clearly see that there are other narratives in play, and there are other things that are stopping you, and then you can unpack it and make and release it in a way.
Absolutely. And one of the important parts of doing it in community, for all the things that you've said, Evie, but also so that you don't end up falling into that sense of guilt or shame, of here I am spending this time on me, and when there's all this other stuff that needs to be done and all these other people that need me, that it's very easy to start, and even when you start being aware of these different narratives that have been driving you, that you may, if you're accustomed to feeling ashamed of stuff, that may be almost like the first place you go to, oh, what a sucker I've been, how stupid, how, so that beating up, like in community, no, we're not doing the beating up. We're just going to hold that space, and we're going to raise the awareness, and then we're going to do what needs to be done to help us break free and release ourselves from those thoughts, those beliefs, those habits, and start to tap into our true potential and functioning from a place of optimal well-being, because that for me is massively important.
That's the most important bit.
Yeah. So I personally, I release the need to prove anything. I'm releasing it out into the ether. I don't need to prove anything. I choose to believe in my worth, and I say it, and I say it now with an absolute sense of belief in here. When I first started saying it, not so much. Right, so it took a while to kind of lay that in, but again, doing PQ, doing the mental fitness, doing the exercises, always bringing myself back to the present, has really enabled me to free myself from so many of the narratives, some of which I didn't even know were narratives in me, until like you were saying earlier, I could pick underneath them. I'd be, oh yeah, I see how that one was playing out for me. So yeah, it's truly brilliant work that changes your life.
Oh yeah, 100%. I do like it. I always like it. It's almost like detective work, and I love that. You just, like once you start noticing yourself and how you do things, how you think, how the patterns work, you know that from there on, only good things can happen, and only you can get better and better and better. And I think that's brilliant.
Absolutely. And there is no shame in revealing. So I think, there is no shame in revealing. When you reveal, it just, all that is doing is just giving you the opportunity to choose something better, something different, something that lifts you up, something that empowers you. Wow, how much better a choice is that? And we want to be able to hold the space to help you do that, and really enable you to realize just how brilliant you are, just
Absolutely.
being you. Awesome.
Excellent.
Okay. So there are 2 for this week. Join us again next week. We're going to continue with the myth busting because there are so many.
They are.
And we haven't captured them all. So, we're sharing the ones that we've captured, but there are so many more. But hopefully along the way, as we look at these different phrases, that you will start to consider which ones may be underneath some of the other language that perhaps you use or that you're more familiar with. And, join us so that we can work with you, help you, and in community raise each other and all of us up.
Absolutely. I mean, and share any phrase that you want us to unpack if you want. Why not? We are open for that.
Yeah, we've got one. You've got somebody to share one last week, and it's coming up next week, so we're on it.
Fabulous. Excellent.
Brilliant. Well,
Thank
wishing you
Yvonne.
all a wonderful day. If you're always, Evie, thank you so much. I mean, it's this, being able to do this with somebody that makes it so, it makes it joyful, even as we're looking at things that are a reminder of some of the challenges and difficulties we have had and may still be experiencing. But being able to do this with you it does actually bring just such an element of joy to it. So thank you so much for showing up every week and being here with me, and actually doing exactly the same in the community.
Yep.
Find out a little bit more at the end of this. As we leave, there'll be a QR code that will take you to our landing page. So go have a look. Go and see what it is that we're offering. And if it resonates with you at all, just follow the little arrows. They'll take you to it. Otherwise, we will see you back here next week.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.